Foundation, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar about expanding Wi-Fi access to your community. This is one in a series of monthly webinars we're offering for our blended broadband communities, past and current grantees, and open to anyone with an interest in using technology to improve community. In a moment, I'll be handing over the reins to Bill Coleman of Community Technology Advisors, and he will provide some introductory remarks and introduce the panel that includes representatives from the City of Buffalo, Todd County Development Corporation, and New America Foundation. To interact with the panelists at any time during today's webinar, you can simply type your question or comment in the chat box. Now, I'm sure most of you on the call today know Bill Coleman of Community Technology Advisors, but for those who don't, Bill has been a Blandin Foundation's primary broadband program consultant for a number of years. Bill?
Thank you, Mary. One of the things that we've tried to do for this Wi-Fi webinar is to provide a fact sheet, and that is loaded as a separate presentation. And we'll provide a link on our Bob post of where you can get that fact sheet. I think Mary will provide more information on that later. But today we have, I think, a very interesting presentation on Wi-Fi and on now something called Super Wi-Fi. And as we've worked with communities around the state, Wi-Fi is often seen as a nice access medium for digital inclusion by providing community places where people without their own computers or without their own internet connection can go and get online. And we also see it as an important part for tourism and business development. So when visitors come to your community, there's adequate connectivity there. People can get online, do the work they need to do, find the restaurants they want to eat at and other attractions, and so on. So today we've assembled, I think, a very excellent panel to help us through this as technology is changing always and different modes of operation to make it happen. We have three speakers, Merton Auger from the City Administrator of Buffalo. Mert and I go way back towards the late 80s through the Star City program from DEED. And our second speaker is going to be Rick Utek. He's Executive Director of the Todd County Development Corporation here in central Minnesota. And then finally, Michael Calabrese is Director of the Wireless Project Future within the Open Technology Institute of the New America Foundation. First up will be Mert Auger, City Administrator for the City of Buffalo. Buffalo is the county seat of Wright County. As I mentioned, Mert and I go back about 25 years, but Buffalo is always one of the shining stars of that program. City of Buffalo was an early entrant into the municipal broadband arena, using their municipal utility as a platform to bring fiber optics to the industrial park, and provided fixed wireless broadband in the community, and finally community-wide Wi-Fi. Mert, tell us your story.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Am I coming through okay? If I am, I'll just start off. First of all, we began back in the year 2000 with a smaller system, a slower system, and finally graduated into the system we have now. We call it the third generation. And we're able to present 5 megabits of bandwidth across our community through a Wi-Fi system. And it's not a free system. You have to rent it out, or you have to pay a monthly fee. You get up to 10 email addresses with that. But if you're at our library or city hall or at our airport, you can gain free access. So we have free access available at all our community buildings. We started out, first of all, let me say that I think any community that fails to at least take a look at high-speed internet or high-speed data is missing an opportunity to bring its community into the world marketplace. You can virtually have a store anywhere in the world and sell things to anywhere in the world if you have the critical infrastructure to do that. And a big part of that can be Wi-Fi. The data must keep up with the market, both in speed and scale. And by that, I mean that as your businesses grow, as they get more sophisticated in providing this type of service or business, the pipe or infrastructure that you provide for data must keep up with that, because people find new ways of doing business. They continually bring video into the mix. And to do video, you have to have a larger pipe. I think the adoption of high-speed internet or data is enabling the community to compete on a world scale. And I think it's a valid government purpose, and it's a valid economic development strategy. I think my belief is if you get into this, you have to think big. You have to think long-term, and you have to think quality. If you get into the business, people are going to want it to be on 24/7, always operation. And as we say in this business, we like to think about the 7 nines. In other words, the system is up 99999 or 99.999% of the time. People rely on it. So when you begin to build these systems, think about the future. Think about doing carrier class services, which is the same way the phone company works with it. As you can see a little bit by the diagram or the photo on the bottom, what carrier class means is that you have fail-proof systems. If something such as a power supply goes down, another one takes over. If one switch goes down, another takes over. And you always have to think about what are you doing to provide, how do you get to your Wi-Fi radios? You can either do that through microwave, you can do it through another wireless system, or you can use fiber optics to get to your switches out in the field or the radios out in the field. Fiber optics is what we call a gold standard in data transport. Its capacity is very great, and it enables you to grow as switching becomes more efficient, and as the technology is involved, you can do more with the same pipe. So it's a good step in the right place, or putting a good step forward if you consider putting in fiber to reach out to all your radio systems and really use it as the backbone of your system. Where we are now, we have 1,150 fiber and wireless company. We're on our 3rd generation wireless system, and we're currently looking at our 4th generation, because I told, if you recall, I said you have to look at the way people are using the system in this current day and age, and more people are doing video intensive applications. They're downloading movies, they're sharing video over the internet. So you have to build an infrastructure that supports this. We also have some long-term contracts with the state of Minnesota, Wright County, the school district, the hospital, and other medical facilities. We virtually have a presence in every institutional building in the city of Buffalo. And the other thing we did, going back to building carrier class systems, we have two providers of internet to us. I mean, we have to go out into the world and get it and bring it here. And what that does, if one goes down, the other takes over. A couple of years back, we used to use Quest or CenturyLink exclusively to provide our main internet service to the city. And then from there, we resold it. However, one time, a contractor cut a cable in Medina and cut off virtually all communications in the city of Buffalo. So we decided right then and there that that wasn't going to happen again, or we'd make it more difficult to happen. So we brought in another provider. So now we actually have 2 providers of the main pipe that comes into Buffalo. So if one goes down, the other takes over. So I'll stop there and be ready for any questions later on.
Very good. Thanks, Mert. Thanks for that introduction of your system, and I think your presentation is right on target. Next up is Rick Utek of Todd County Development Corporation. I've known Rick for quite a while too, working through his work at Itasca Economic Development Corporation. I've also known Todd Cowdy through my own consulting work over the years. Actually, one of my first clients, Alex Wego, Rick's predecessor, was an early voice for broadband development in Todd County, and now Rick continues that focus. Todd has been working to get 100% coverage within the county to meet the state broadband goals, and that work continues on. As an interim and complementary step, Todd County Development Corporation working to increase the number of Wi-Fi hotspots in the county. Rick, how is that going?
It's actually going pretty well. We currently are just about there with our project goals. We're still in the process of still go through next spring. But what I'd like to do is talk a little bit first about what we've done here too, Bill. It's, we have from 2011 to 2012, we did a countywide feasibility study and also held a countywide meeting to educate the public in what we found out, results of the study. And then from that, in the end of 2012, beginning 2013, we formed the Todd County Fiber Band Committee. And that was formed mainly to find solutions how we could get fiber or move forward on this, and also to educate the public also. In 2013 here, we connected with the area providers, sent out letters, contacting them by phone, emails, and we actually are scheduling meetings. This is ongoing with the providers. We have 6 providers in Todd County, that touch the county here. So when I first came, there was 8 providers. So we have a lot of issues as far as, trying to get people together and everything for internet connection. But we're scheduling meetings. We've met with 4 of them already out of the 6, and we're planning meetings with the other 2 to try to either see what they can do for us or form some type of public-private partnership. And then also we, with the Blind and Innovation Grant, we've came to the Wi-Fi project that we have. That includes doing some e-commerce and technology classes or workshops here also. Our goal in the Wi-Fi project was to create 10 public Wi-Fi hotspots at different locations around Todd County at 10 different communities. Actually 8 different communities, I should say. And our project basically is to provide technical and financial assistance, for those locations to, as a 1-year project, to see how they would end up, and hopefully they'll continue it as they went along, because see the value of having Wi-Fi available in the communities and also in businesses. And we did some things like press releases, advertising, presentation to the city councils, county board on it. And we are, as far as, I'll go ahead and click this forward here. Sorry about that one. We're working to assist the 10 Wi-Fi hotspots and also provide the technical and financial service to the locations, and also provide greater access to underserved areas. We have a lot of underserved areas in Todd County here, and more so in the rural areas, and also enhance economic opportunities for businesses through Wi-Fi and connection barriers. And as I said before, we have 8 participating communities. We basically use 2 providers because these are in actual cities where we're doing this in, and in public and private sector locations. Cost and location was a big factor for this. We basically have 3 restaurants, 2 coffee shops, and 4 community locations, including city halls, historical society in Staples, which is also connected with the Amtrak station there. When people come in at 4 o'clock in the morning to get on their Amtrak, they'll have Wi-Fi there to use while they're waiting for the train to stop in. And we're working, currently we have 6 up and running, and 3 we're working on trying to get work with the providers to get everything settled and everything. And then we've done some location posters for those locations, and I can go ahead and, let's see, here's a picture of the location poster right here. It's kind of a background to it, a shadowed background, but basically we're connected, free public Wi-Fi service available here. And this is, we left some space on there so the business can put some information, or the community can put some information on the left side. but it's basically an example. The locations we dropped it off at, the posters they put in the windows, and it's a good way to show people that these locations have Wi-Fi service available, free public Wi-Fi service available. And then also our location posters provide the recognition, but also the advertising locations we did for the public Wi-Fi hotspots, just the general advertising through local media and everything has helped quite a bit. Measured success, what we'd like to see is increased use by citizens and area visitors, and this would help the communities, and especially for them to go to, if they come to communities, spend longer time in communities to use Wi-Fi, but also see some of the attractions in the communities. Also increase opportunities for businesses that are using it. We found that their traffic has increased, and also the sales have increased. So, and trying to see the value of having Wi-Fi in their businesses, especially on the restaurants or in the community centers, for having more people go through. And also retention. We'd like to see that these locations be retained, you know, after the year. And we're from the people we've talked to so far that have locations set up, they're very interested in continuing it on their own, and they see the value of having it there also. And ending notes, through promotions program, you know, we've experienced a lot of other businesses that really didn't take us up on the program. You know, some just want to do it by themselves, but they saw the value in it, what we're trying to do, and they're actually Wi-Fi systems and just operating by themselves without our help, which is great. If we can get the message out there that there's value to it, they'll use it. And also part of the original project, we're hosting e-commerce technology classes along with this grant. And what we're trying to do with the e-commerce classes also, we're trying to educate people to use how to use the internet, use their to locate businesses, locate things in the community, and also web pages, different websites that would be of use to them also. And I think that's it. I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and Rick, Bernadine Jocelyn did have a question. She said, how did you solicit the locations to work with, and did you have more takers than available money to help them? And if so, what criteria did you use to select the location?
We tried to use, we actually had a lot of interest right away when we put out the press release on it. We tried to keep the areas where access would be available to everybody, you know, from kids to the senior citizens. And basically we wanted to make sure that everybody had access to it. The restaurants were basically, actually we had 2 Dairy Queens, which was interesting. And it was great because everybody goes in there and people come in there even if they don't buy anything, which is great. And that's part of our contract, is that even if they don't buy anything, they come and use a service or sit out in the parking lot and use a service, which is great. We've had a real strong interest. We've had more people apply for it than ones we have. I still have one left, but I've had people, organizations like furniture stores or different types that really didn't fit the mold for what we're trying to do, but I have some interest for the last spot. So I did turn down a couple the communities wanted to be in their municipal liquor store, didn't quite work for kids and things like that. So we're trying to keep this the services, public Wi-Fi services, open to everybody who walks in and wants to use it.
Okay, good. And then Lee Untight has a couple questions. First one's about any legal liability for those hotspots. You know, how do you absolve the Todd County Development Corporation out of any kind of liability around illegal downloading or file sharing? Do you guys look into that at all?
Yes, that's right in our agreement. And actually we asked them to put a disclaimer at their website. That's part of the agreement, that they will, at their site location, that they will have that we're not responsible for the download. We asked them to put you know, blocks on certain if they want to do that. That's up to them. But okay. We really haven't had any issues like that yet.
Do they have kind of an opening splash page for Todd County when they open that, or is that when people log on, do they have to agree to terms of service or anything?
I leave that up to, when I do my contract with the businesses, I spell our terms on it. And I basically, when that's spelled out, what we need in our contract is in there. And if they want to add some other things, that would be in there, and that would be up to them.
Okay.
Good.
We're
basically using services here. We're using Arvig and Charter.
Okay. And then Lee had another question about financial sustainability. When are you asking people to commit to a longer term after the incentive dollars are gone? Is that part of the application process, or are there any obligation?
We ask them to commit for 1 year, and the people who have committed actually are encouraged. They'd like to keep doing it. And the cost really isn't bad. What we do is I've spelled out that we're covering base costs, base costs for base service and router and things like that. And basically, it's some have even gone and increased the service even without us helping them. Went to an upgraded service or faster service or better equipment.
I suppose there's a little bit of peer pressure once people start coming in and using the Wi-Fi. They're going to expect that to continue. It'll be a tough transition to say, well, we're not providing that anymore. It becomes part of the identity of the business.
All right. Everybody that comes in pretty much in any of these communities or the businesses have an electronic device that can access the internet. So it's they're seeing the value of it, definitely.
Great. Well, thanks, Rick, and stand by. There could be more questions as we go.
Okay, thank you.
Our final speaker today is Michael Calabrese. He's the director of the Wireless Future Project at the New America Foundation. Michael is an attorney and graduate of both Stanford Business and Law School, and he's appointed member of the U.S. Department of Commerce Spectrum Management Advisory Committee. Also serves as an invited expert on the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology Spectrum Reform Working Group over the last few years. I want to really thank Michael. He and I had never really talked before this afternoon when we got online, for agreeing to jump in at the last minute to participate in our webinar. I think bringing him into the webinar is a great example of saying when one door closes, another opens. And the door that Michael opened might be a great answer for many of our rural communities. We're not talking just about Wi-Fi here with its many limitations. Hear about a new super Wi-Fi and a new role for libraries and maybe other organizations as a center for big bandwidth in our rural communities. Michael, talk to us about white spaces, libraries, and broadband.
All right. Well, thanks, Bill. And I may be asking for the slides to be advanced because I'm having a little trouble with the connection. But in any case, so on the first slide, it really puts kind of our work here in context. I don't know if you've changed. Yeah, there it is. We are part of my organization, New America Foundation, is part of a much broader national coalition of consumer education, civil rights, and other groups that actually for 10 years now, believe it or not, have been advocating for a more robust form of Wi-Fi access. Because right now, Wi-Fi is most of what you use is at what they call the 2.4 gigahertz band, which is considerably above at a considerably higher frequency than what the mobile wireless carriers use, like, for example, AT&T or Verizon Wireless for their business. And so it doesn't travel long distances or go through obstacles very easily. And so what I originally proposed to the Federal Communication Commission was that there should be unlicensed access to the vacant TV channels. Because actually the vast majority of TV channels are so-called white space. In other words, they're not being used by broadcasters, but instead they are essentially guard bands between stations. So, and the advantages of this is, would be to promote better wireless broadband for rural and unserved areas, which is important for economic development, and as you know, where you're located, that some of these rural and small town areas lag behind in terms of broadband access and certainly speed. And then also more robust Wi-Fi networks as both a complement and alternative to the licensed carrier networks. On the next slide, it's just a quick image of, as realtors often say, location, 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 because spectrum is either incredibly valuable or not so much, depending on how high or low the frequency. So TV band spectrum is uniquely valuable because it will cover, you can cover large areas with the same equipment. For example, 4 or 5 times as much area with the same base station at the same power level on TV spectrum compared, for example, to the 2.4 gigahertz band. So that translates into lower CapEx and also better in-building penetration, so that even in urban areas, you can have a Wi-Fi network that is, gives much better quality of service, is available in more places, fewer dead spots, etc. On the next slide, describes a bit about what is super Wi-Fi. And super Wi-Fi is the term, it was actually the sort of label that was given to unlicensed access to the vacant TV channels by the chairman of the FCC a few years back. And it's, as I mentioned, it's the vacant local TV channels that are now usable on an unlicensed basis for broadband, as well as for more narrowband applications like machine-to-machine. So, for example, the agribusiness companies like John Deere and Caterpillar are really experimenting with integrating it into lots of their automated systems and monitoring systems. So you could have, you might call it the wireless farm, and be communicating with all your gear, running your irrigation systems, remote video cameras, all kinds of things like that. So it utilizes the unused TV broadcast frequencies, which means that in markets that have fewer TV stations, it's much more plentiful. So there's very few unlicensed channels available for Wi-Fi in New York City, but there's a ton of them available in, the smaller town and rural areas, and even in cities, and Minneapolis might be one of these, even in cities that are not very close to other big cities, because the rules are very conservative. So many of the channels, for example, in a place like Washington, D.C., a lot of our channels get blocked off so that, to really to protect people who might be watching Baltimore television or Richmond television, even though it's far away, which is something that's been frustrating to us. But that's less of a problem in many other places. And then, as I mentioned, these lower frequencies allow signals to cover far larger areas, and they penetrate or bend around obstacles, such as foliage, and go deeper indoors compared to higher frequencies. And you can see this little map there of the television band and the different things that are on there. On the next slide, this describes, what I'll describe is kind of one of, 3 different initiatives that are going on right now to take advantage of this new technology. One is something that I started a year ago. It's called Air.U, and the idea basically is to try to use TV white space technology to help rural college communities. So both the colleges, that are not, these would be primarily colleges, for example, that aren't necessarily rich in fiber or connected to internet too, and also their surrounding communities, which often lack adequate connectivity. So it's an initiative by consortium of higher ed groups, which you can see there, such as the United Negro College Fund, New England Board of Higher Education, Appalachian Regional Commission, CNIC, which is the California Education Network, and so on. And what we've done is we've basically educated the member schools in these different associations as about the technology and the benefits in terms of incorporating it into their wireless efforts. For the reasons I've said, super Wi-Fi is particularly well suited for these rural and small city colleges and universities because they have higher bandwidth requirements, but fewer alternatives and also more white space. So we've been working on a number of pilots. One that has already been deployed. I'll talk about on the next slide. So you can go forward. This is the University of West Virginia in Morganton, West Virginia, which is a very sort of, although it's a sizable town, it's in a very rural, hilly, rugged sort of area. So the university is sort of strung out, stretches about 3 miles along a river, very hilly, lots of trees. So, and they had no really good, they have hardly any outdoor Wi-Fi at all, although they do have fiber right to the heart of the campus. And so we took advantage of that by putting, you can see in the bottom right picture, where those lines are, those green and yellow lines are coming together. That's the roof of the engineering building. And so from the roof of their engineering building, where there's a fiber pop, which is actually from the state INET. So the state of West Virginia, part of the Economic Recovery Act, had extended their state INET, and it goes, right into that building. So from the top of there, we put a TV white space data base station, actually a couple of them, which is essentially just transmitting broadband connectivity over the TV spectrum, and it goes to it broadcasts it out to client devices, right, to receiving stations at various points. And the initial deployment was to very similar to, I think, to what the first presenter mentioned about a train station. The university has a really unique personal rapid transit system. It's a tram system that carries about 15,000 students and faculty per day, with 5 station platforms where people, end up congregating and waiting and so on. So that was the first deployment, was to put these little receivers, and they have, what they do is receive the bandwidth, which is typically 12 megabits per second of bandwidth over each TV channel. They receive that, they translate it, there's a Wi-Fi router, incorporated in the device, and they rebroadcast it as Wi-Fi connectivity. And, it works extremely well, even, on the other side of large buildings or groves of trees and so on. And we're doing it over, say a 2-mile distance. And in fact, that's one of the key takeaways here is, I think this technology really is complementary to what the other 2 presenters were talking about, particularly, for example, what you're doing in Todd County, because what this does is it allows you to have, you don't need to have the Wi-Fi hotspot right on top of your high-capacity wireline connection. You can have the Wi-Fi hotspot 2 miles away or 3 miles away from the wire. So without, so if you have line of sight, you can always use a higher frequency to do the same thing, which is actually better in many cases. But particularly where you don't have that line of sight, this allows you to basically move bandwidth, say move anywhere from 10 to 100 megabits per second of bandwidth from a place where you have access to wireline backhaul, like a fiber connection, and send that 2 or 3 miles away to another location that lacks bandwidth. or broadcast it over an area where you may have a bunch of different client devices receiving it and translating it into, the Wi-Fi that would that works with anybody's mobile device. On the next slide, there's just a couple more. Here's a kind of I don't know, practical example. Another example of that is it's a new initiative that's kind of grew out of Air.U called the Gigabit Libraries Network, which I advised on, and it's being led by a gentleman named Don Means. And essentially what it does is very similar to what we did at West Virginia University. They asked for applications for anyone who wanted to be libraries that wanted to trial this technology. And they actually just announced 2 weeks ago that from 50 applications that four individual libraries and 2 state library consortia are going to be the first white space library trials. And essentially the purpose is to there's 2 sort of use cases initially. One is to deliver bandwidth to libraries without high-speed wireline connections, because believe it or not, something like 40 or 50% of libraries are relying on connections as slow as a T1 line, having like 1 to 3 megabits per second. So those libraries simply need more bandwidth. So this actually started in Kansas City, where on one hand they will soon be rich in connectivity because the Google Fiber project is giving each library a free gigabit fiber connection. But they have an environmental library that's outside the Google footprint and has nothing but a T1. So from the roof of one library to that library, they will move, something like 50 megabits per second of the spare capacity from one library to another. Another use case is for satellite library hotspots. In other words, from a high site, let's say in a circumference of, or in a radius of, 2 to 3 miles easily, and can even go beyond that, although you start to lose throughput. You can set up a number of different satellite hotspots and even put it on a bookmobile, so that when it pulls up someplace, there's connectivity and access to library services. So one of these 6 libraries, for example, they wanted it because they are only open 2 days a week for budget reasons. So what they're going to do is make sure that at least there is online access to all the library resources as well as the internet in general, 24/7, and a number of other locations such as some community centers that are within a few miles of the library. On the next slide, to kind of a grander ambition, you might say, or a more broad use for communities to think about this is Garrett County, Maryland, which is near Morganton, West Virginia. So it's the same topography. It's rural, it's heavily wooded, it's mountainous. And as you can see on the right side, those different colored areas, green, purple, red, blue, those are pockets, residential pockets that have only dial-up service. They have no broadband at all, not even DSL. And so this project, which we advised on, is being funded by one of the Air.U partners, the Appalachian Regional Commission, because it's in Appalachia. And what it's going to be is an all-white space network that will put basically it's going to put white space base stations at high points, and then put client devices on homes, probably, let's say where there's a few homes close together, they may share one, or a home may have its own. But in any event, the idea would be that to use line of sight wireless fiber to go from the one fiber pop they have in the county from the state of Maryland. They're going to go from there using 5 gigahertz unlicensed spectrum to as you see in the left side there, that tower, that's an example of a high pole, pole they'll have in a within these different communities, and then distributed from there over another fairly long distance to the individual homes and businesses. And so the goal is to get 3,000 unserved homes, hooked up this way. Although the initial deployment this fall will be about 800 homes down in primarily in that red zone on the bottom. And then that's it. So sorry I took so long to get through that, but I just wanted to make sure you knew that, just the kind of use cases that could be enhanced with this new super Wi-Fi technology.
Michael, that's really interesting stuff there. So depending on the radio, that can either be point-to-point or point-to-multi-point. Is that kind of
right, exactly. And the point I didn't make very clear was that, so for example, in this Garrett County, from where the state brought fiber in to the county, it may be, for example, 5 or 10 miles to one of these pockets to these residential pockets that are unserved. So to the extent that they can get line of sight, what they're better doing, you can use white space TV spectrum for that, but it's not great because it has limited capacity. In other words, the channel size is small. But what they'll do is they'll use, for when they have line of sight, they'll use the higher frequency unlicensed spectrum at 5 gigahertz, which has very wide channels. So you can bring as much as a gigabit of capacity using something such as ubiquity air fiber to the local area, and then over, let's say, those couple square miles, you can use the television white space very efficiently to go from the base station to the individual access points at homes and businesses.
Can you talk a little bit about the impact of Universal Service Fund restrictions on, our libraries all get Universal Service Funds. Generally, they see themselves as not being able to resell or, make that so available. Are you guys running into that kind of issue?
Yeah, we are. I mean, certainly they can't resell it, that's for sure. But the issue that we've been trying to sort out with the FCC here in Washington is, can the libraries? So let's say E-Rate is paying for their connection. Say it's a cable company like Comcast or Charter, and they're and they have 50 megabits per second. And if they want to extend that bandwidth, in other words, extend that bandwidth out into the community as an extension of the library's own services. In other words, it's essentially the same thing you get at the library, but you could access it perhaps a mile away at a community center, which is a satellite library hotspot. And the splash page may say, or a poster, like I love this poster you guys have. The poster may say, this is a library extension site or something. So one issue becomes, is that okay? Given the E-rate subsidy, and we think it is, but we're asking the FCC to clarify that.
Okay, and so my next question then is, as the library is broadcasting this out over, a couple mile, diameter area, people kind of need special? Is that generally an open network, just like a public Wi-Fi spot, or is that a secured kind of log-on kind of system that?
Whatever they want.
Okay.
They can configure it either way, because it's anyone who tries to connect is ultimately going back through their server, just as if you were sitting in the library. And so they could either have require you to authenticate using a library card number, or they could leave it open. They could also control it which I think they would probably in terms of, some of the things that you might be able to access, such as pornography or whatever.
Sure. And so is this something that you guys are doing now on a trial basis by permission of the FCC, or can anyone start doing this right now?
Oh, anyone can start doing it right now, because earlier this year the FCC gave final nationwide approval to the to these databases. I haven't gotten into some. There's a little bit of the complication behind the curtain, which is that these devices need to check a database to make sure, based on their location, that they're using vacant TV channels, so that they don't interfere with television. So that whole system of automatically checking to make sure that you're only using the vacant channels, that was all brought online this year. The only holdup right now, to be honest, is for the FCC to certify the equipment. There's basically 4 companies that are producing the base stations and CPE for this, and they're all kind of queued up waiting for the final certification so that they can go into more of a mass production and start bringing the price points down. But it's really quite affordable at the margin. I mean, that's why Garrett County is using it in Appalachia, because just to give you a sense, the expectation is that the base stations, and by base station I mean something that's that's connected to a high capacity backhaul. So the base stations are likely to cost around $1,800 to $2,000, and the CPE, so the client devices, around $400 to $500 initially. Okay. So you're probably talking about something like that. So for a library, it's really not, like I said, the one in Kansas City, they could both send their excess bandwidth, excess capacity to the sister library, and probably also light up a couple satellite library hotspots, all for $3,000 to $4,000.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see how people might use this. Are there other questions? I don't see any in the chat box for any of our speakers. Merton, I guess I have a question for you around your next generation wireless that you're considering. Is that some switch over to more of a 4G network, going away from Wi-Fi to some 4G kind of service?
Bill, that's going to allow us to go up to around 60 megabits, where right now our top is around 5. Right now, if you look at
is that the technology then you're thinking about as a 4G?
No, it's still WiMAX or Wi-Fi.
Okay.
It just allows more throughput, higher bandwidth.
Well, okay. And then what would that do to you with your backbone and your need for backhaul? Is that a big deal for you to take in your own business planning, to suddenly go from 3 mega household to 50 mega household?
That's what that'll allow us to do. But the backhaul, if you recall, is our fiber optic network that has a lot of capacity in it. So it really doesn't put a strain on that. It can handle the requirements of that upgraded system.
Okay, very good. Other questions? I think the white spaces technology, Minnesota has such in many cases, excellent middle mile networks into our schools and libraries and colleges, and I think that's going to be a very interesting possibility for people to think about as a way to provide a real option for people in communities. Many communities only have one provider. This can certainly bring a second choice for people on a more of a public benefit kind of provision as opposed to a utility benefit or utility service. That will be a Michael, what do you see as the politics of that?
Well, I don't think there's a problem unless you're kind of competing head to head as a substitute for the the basic commercial service. So I mean, if I suppose if communities were trying to use their public fiber as the jumping off point to provide, I guess the sort of thing that maybe that Merton's doing is, and there was a fixed wireless connection to the home that substitutes for their cable or something. Not that people want to give up television. That becomes an issue. But I think as a way to reach, like whether it's in Garrett County or some other examples I can give, as a way to extend bandwidth to places that really don't have it, or have too little, or for a public purpose, for a public service. It shouldn't, it shouldn't be too controversial. Certainly, we haven't gotten any real pushback yet, but it's early in the game.
We have a number of rural communities that are kind of stuck with 1.5 or maybe 3 meg service that they're paying $40, $50 a month for, and this would certainly, if the library started broadcasting out a signal that people could tap into for a similar speed for zero price, that would definitely shake up some of our marketplaces, which I think would be a good thing, but we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I should mention that. So right now, sort of this first generation of TV white space, the standard, right, which is called it's IEEE 802.22 standard. It's a fixed wireless standard, which means that there's no direct consumer interface to the TV airwaves. That's why there's a Wi-Fi router that's integrated into these client devices. In other words, it has to be rebroadcast as Wi-Fi because it's actually Wi-Fi chips, the 2.4 band, that are embedded in all the smartphones and laptops and so on, and tablets. But the industry is also working on an 802.11 AF standard, which would allow a direct air interface, between mobile devices and a TV band's base station. And then it gets really interesting because you could conceive of literally broadcast a basic level of connectivity over an area, and people who are mobile could tune into that, almost like you're walking around with a mobile TV set or something. But right now you have to be in a conventional Wi-Fi hotspot. So I don't think it's much of a substitute for home service, home broadband, because people would literally have to go to the community center or sit in the parking lot or whatever to use it, just the way they sometimes do outside libraries.
Then so that makes more sense. I was picturing this as a hotspot that was maybe a mile wide in diameter.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was trying to say early, and it's important to know that right now, what this is really is a tool to extend the distance your Wi-Fi, your conventional Wi-Fi hotspot, the same kind you have today with the same limitations, extend the distance that those can be from the bandwidth, from the backhaul.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so,
good. Well, I'm glad I clarified. Glad I'm I'm glad I'm straightened out on that, so because I had a different impression. So that's good, good. Mary, I think it's time to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bill. And thank you, Mert, Michael, and Rick for joining us on the webinar today. Our next webinar will be Thursday, October 10th from 3 to 4 p.m. and our topic will be Community Technology Networking Events. Thanks everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day.